It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind. It either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
What are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better... Sheriff? Zia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
Hi, this is Drew Pliska, and you're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you. Tonight, we're going to be chatting with Dan. And Dan was actually a law enforcement officer most of his life. And back in 1995, he had an encounter on the Oregon coast. And it's kind of a fascinating area of the Oregon coast, because as you head out there, you wouldn't think you'd run into Bigfoot on the beach, but out at the Oregon coast, it's very, very dense forest, rugged country, and then it opens up to the beach. So right up to the beach, there's a ton of areas to hide, and a lot of encounters come out of that area. And so Dan will be going into that tonight. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance to check out sasquatchchronicles.com, you can become a member and get additional shows. On YouTube, I've been putting up all this last week. I've been putting up, I call them SC Shorts. It's Sasquatch Chronicles, kind of a short version of people talking about their encounters. And I created a playlist on the YouTube channel on Sasquatch Chronicles. If you get a chance to check it out, it's kind of fun to put up just short versions of the encounters. So I hope you guys get a chance to check it out, and I hope you enjoy it. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Dan to the show. Dan, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, Wes.
Yeah, Dan, thank you again for being here. And I know your encounter happened back in 1995 on the Oregon coast. Before we jump into the encounter, if you would give us a little bit about your background.
Well, at the time, that it was 1995, I believe, that year, August 14th. I'll check my notes. It was in the summer of August of 95, I believe. And at that time, I was working for the U.S. Forest Service. I was a law enforcement person for that ranger. Actually, the position was called, they don't have it anymore, but it's called Level 2 Law Enforcement Officer. And there was like a Level 4. Anybody who knows was in that back in those days would know about the Level 2. And then it later became, I think they call them now Forest Protection Officers for the Department of Agriculture, U.S. Forest Service. But I started in that, I guess early 90s, several years before the sighting. And I subsequently, after that sighting, around that time, I also started to, I went and got training for a state commission. So I was a police officer, later a sheriff's deputy. So you may hear, police officer, ranger. I was actually both. I did both jobs at the same time. And I was in law enforcement all the way up to, I guess, around 2003, around there, and then switched if careers. I was then the job that I had with the Forest Service was fantastic. It was I patrolled on a dirt bike basically in the national forest in an area in Colorado, Rampart Range it was called, and it had a lot of trails. And I basically enforced the national forest laws on a dirt bike. I had a motorcycle that was provided by me as my vehicle. And then that was a great job. I loved it. It was a seasonal job, wasn't full-time, didn't have the benefits like a lot of the people that work for the Forest Service, but it was a fantastic job. And that was part of the reason why I got into other parts of law enforcement, is trying as a career. But anyway, around 2003, I started doing motorcycle touring as a guide, and that's what I've been doing here, abroad, other countries, and mostly in Alaska since 2003. So that's kind of what I do now. Yeah.
Well, if you would take us back to 1995, kind of what were you doing and what happened?
I was on a vacation. We're doing a one-way trip. I was with at the time, my girlfriend, and we were traveling from, I think it was San Francisco we flew into, and did a one-way trip northbound on the Pacific coast, ending up in Seattle. That was the end point, and flew back home. But basically, we rented a car, and we're just camping and I think staying at some hotels along the way and just enjoying the Pacific coast. We were traveling up north, and then there was an area that presented itself where we possibly could camp on a beach, which I had never done, and we had not done on that trip. And we're at this lookout, and I go, well, it looks like some RVs down there, down that way. There must be a road. So we went further north, went down this road, and there was this, basically this Christian camp and public camp too, and you could camp there in an RV or whatever. So we went past that, didn't have an RV, and then went down south of that, not too far, more secluded, and went over through these little trails, basically ended on a bluff, walked over the bluff to the beach, and had this fantastic view of the Pacific Ocean. And that's where I placed a tent and, decided to camp. And that's really, how it started. So, not anywhere in my mind did I come across that what was going to happen there on a beach. Maybe you might kind of get the willies being in a campground somewhere, think of a bear or whatever, but it was this really beautiful place to camp. And so we had the tent was up, had made a fire, that someone had a fire there before, kind of found a makeshift camp area on the beach. And, just, I think actually probably were even roasting marshmallows there and sitting on a log. And I noticed, and this is probably around West, I guess, 9:30. It was after sunset, so it was getting kind of dark, or getting pretty darn dark. The moon was out, so it was pretty well illuminated at night with the moon, with the ocean and the beach. But I noticed to the south, so you're looking directly to the to the west. To the south would be my left, north would be to my right, as the beach would go left to right. And I noticed down to my left, quite a ways down, was a person standing there. And I thought, well, I thought it was odd how a person got by us down there, and I didn't see them go down. And then knowing the direction we came up from the south, there was really nothing. It's this wilderness, this really rugged coast along the Pacific coast, at least in that area at the time. So I thought it was kind of odd that the person was there, and then it kind of looked like they were looking down too. Maybe I thought, well, maybe look for sand dollars. I don't know. But then I thought, well, maybe someone's trying to, check us out, do us some harm. Being paranoid cop at the time. Person took off. Walked back down, out of sight, out of mind. And then sometime later, I noticed the person coming back, and it was walking towards us. So then we both were alerted to that, and we're just watching. And then this person was wearing all black, which I thought was odd. And it's, at the distance seemed black. Didn't see any colors, or didn't see like cargo shorts or anything like that. Just all kind of this one uniform black figure. walking towards us on the beach. We're a little raised up, probably, I don't know, 6-7 feet up, kind of on a bluff, looking down on the beach as it goes to the sea level, to the ocean. And the person, so I'll say person at the time, was walking northbound, coming left to right, and stopped at a certain point and then just kind of stared in our direction and then turned around and went back down. I thought, well, that's kind of weird behavior. Then again, sometime later, came back again, but this time didn't stop. It was kind of like it was, I guess I would, lack of a better term, was kind of just checking, kind of creeping in and back, testing the water, so to speak. So then this time, the person came by, then came directly in front of us, didn't ever stop and look at us, just kind of was minding its own business, and walked from that point about, and then turned around and went back. What I thought was odd about that was, one is the person seemed taller, as tall as us as we were, sitting there on the beach, and was huge and all black. And I think I just thought to myself, what in the heck is this? And went back down. So then I'm being a little bit more kind of alert. I grabbed a mag light. I had a little mag light, one of those mini mag lights, the bulbs in the back of the little mag light with the batteries, and had that on the ready. I wasn't armed or anything. So the next time, and from the beginning to this time, probably it's been, a half hour or more, from the very first I noticed to this point. Came back again, went further than that point, and then went past us, and then went further to the north, and it was looking down, kind of mostly just looking down, like looking for something, like you would look if you're looking for something on the beach. And what I noticed was odd about this, one is, all black. Two, the pace it was walking, I mean, it would be as if the distance it covered as it walked would be if maybe a person were jogging, not running, sprinting, but jogging pretty quickly. But this person, the mechanics, it was just walking just casually, I would say. And also the head, because you could see the head, clearly, and the whole body. It didn't bounce up and down as if you were kind of walking, especially in sand. You might bounce a little bit up and down with head bob. It literally just glided across the beach, and it was like it just the most perfect motion, just fluid. Went past us, was looking down. There was a bit of some water, I don't know what you call it, a little tide pool from when the tide was up, probably looking for creatures or whatever, and then came back down and went back down. And I think we joked, said, well, that must be Bigfoot. So, but not seriously thinking that it was, but thinking, what the heck is that? So I think at that point, she stayed up, the girlfriend at the time, stayed up at the camp, and I said, I'm going to go down the beach with the mag light, and when I get to where it walked last, could you yell out, and I'll just start looking for the footprints or whatever down there. So I kind of ran down my light, and then when I think she about yelled out, or one of the two, I literally tripped and fell. I think I dropped my flashlight. And a print was like a divot in the sand. It was deep, and it, basically I tripped on it. And so then I'm looking, and I'm like, wow, what the heck is this? This is huge. So I called her down. She came down, and she looked, and we're just amazed looking at these prints. And flashlight is still working at that point, I believe. And then we're looking and just kind of just milling around there in front of the camp, down towards the beach and the ocean there, in that direction to the west. And so I'm facing to the south, and she's facing, I guess, to the north. So she's in front of me. We're kind of mirroring each other. And, or actually, I'm sorry, reverse that. I'm looking north, she's looking south. She says, here, it's coming back. And then I turned around, and I'm like, holy crap, I probably said something else. But here, this person's coming back, walking that same direction, the same gates towards us, and she was getting pretty nervous. Come on, start pulling me, and she goes, come on, and what was weird is the distance something would be that far away. Someone walking shouldn't cover that much ground that quickly, just walking. That was the eerie part of it. It's like it's there and it's there. I was like, wow, it shouldn't be there that quick. So she runs up towards the tent, top of the bluff, I don't know, 100 feet or so. And I stayed there, and I'm just going to stay there and wait and see what this is or who this is screwing with us. And yeah, I think around that time, maybe before that, the flashlight had gone out, of course. I was looking for the bulb in the back, and then couldn't really deal with that. That's when I noticed it coming back. And then as the Bigfoot came closer, the person I thought at the time, she ran up, and I just was staring and looking. And what I noticed, Wes, what was really crazy about it was not so much when you look at somebody or a person that's, I don't know how far away it was, how many yards at which point, it was further down field from you. It shouldn't be bigger than you, much bigger. But it was huge, towering that distance, and that didn't add up, right? The gait it's walking doesn't add up. What else doesn't add up is the shoulders were immense. They were probably as wide as I probably was tall almost, or not quite, but it was just, 4 foot plus shoulders on this thing, no neck, a head on top of it. And as I got closer, she ran up again. I'm kind of repeating myself, but I stared, and I think I yelled out, "Stop, I'm going to shoot." I didn't have a gun. I was armed. And then it just kept coming, kept walking. It almost didn't even really look at me. It just was kind of minding its own business, looking down, still coming, I'm sure, looking up, but kind of looking down, crouching down a little bit as it walked. And it could care less that I was there. And it could care less that we were up at the beach. It's almost like if you were a seagull on a beach and you go for a walk on a beach, you could care less. The seagull's no threat to you. You don't even mind it. I guess I can have correlation, but it came closer, and then there is a point where this is fight or this is flight, okay? And there's no way I'm fighting this thing. I'm certainly going to be flighting, I thought I was going to kind of fight and maybe scare it off or you say something, but it kept coming, didn't stop, didn't hesitate. It wasn't aggressive. It just was walking. There was no snarling. There was no raising its hands up or screaming. It just kept walking like it's just like, you're in my way. You're a little nothing. Get out of my way. I'm coming up the beach. And I just kept staring. And then as the Bigfoot, well, I'll say that now, got closer, I could start to see hair. And I could see hair under the arms, like draping down a little bit as the arms swing. The arms were, our arms, I guess, as we walk, I'm going to guess, are just above our knees or our thighs. These arms were down below its knees, maybe near the upper calf, I guess. Lack of a better, I would say they're much longer than they should be. And it was just, pendulating as it walked towards the arm swing was pretty pronounced. And it just kept coming. And then when I noticed hair, and I noticed this is not probably a person in a suit who, that's crazy enough as it is, I think what freaked me out was I'd never been that scared ever in my life. And I'm not saying I'm a super brave person, but being in law enforcement, there's a lot of things I have come across that were pretty, scary and life-threatening. But this was something that, training does not prepare you for, or anything anyone would prepare you for. This thing, it doesn't exist. It exists in front of you. And then when I noticed the hair, everything kind of hit me. I just basically froze. And I'd never been so scared in my life that I ever felt like passing out, which I wasn't going to pass out, but I froze. And I never froze before, ever, where I couldn't even move. I think shock kind of hit me at that second, and that's what scared me the most. I couldn't even move, which I needed to go. And then I just kind of went from kind of tunnel vision. I could hear her screaming, "Run, run!" So then I snapped out of it, and I ran as fast as I could possibly run towards the top where she was. And all I can think of in the back of my mind is this thing's running after me, which it could have caught me in just a millisecond. I'm sure it could have. And I ran to the top of the bluff and, out of breath, panicking. She's panicking. And we started to go towards the car, but we stopped. We turned around, got maybe part of the way before we got on the other side of the bluff to where the car was, and looked. And what it had done as it kept walking, and she said that, later, that as I was running up towards her, It never stopped. It never turned. It just kept its cadence going as I ran for my life, feeling at the top of the bluff. And it basically went by us down there, went down to the end of this little tide pool, and turned around and went right back down to the south again. And never even cared. So that was the entirety of the sighting at that point. And then some other events happened after that. I'll just kind of go into that if that's okay. So we run over the bluff. We get to the car. It's locked. I'm like, give me the keys. This is like one of them horror stories, right? You have the keys. No, you have the keys. Well, the keys are in the tent on the beach on the other side of the bluff, down where the Bigfoot is. So can't get in the car, can't leave. The keys are down there. So we're like, what are we going to do? All my luggage and stuff's in there, and apparently the keys to the car. So we remembered the RV park, just a little further up, the quarter mile, whatever. So we can't drive up there. So we have no flashlight. We went, basically went for help. So we walked up to where the RV little camp was, at this Christian camp. And there's people out there with dogs and kids, and they're sitting in their chairs, their fires next to their RVs. And here we come out of the darkness, and we're like, "Help!" There's a, I think I said something like, "There's a large person, huge person walking on the beach. It almost looked like it was covered in hair down by our tent. And can somebody help us?" And this is the bizarrest thing. Well, first off, people would either laugh at you or just think you're nuts, These people that were in Oregon camping, I don't know if they're locals, maybe they were. They all literally grabbed their kids, grabbed their pets, grabbed their chairs. All of them went into their RVs, shut their doors, and we're just sitting there like, I cannot believe this is happening. And one of them took a flashlight and threw it out the window and shut the window. No one said a word to us, but we got a flashlight. And that happened. So they obviously didn't think we were nuts, or we scared them enough. So now we have a flashlight. So then we go back, we go over, scan around, get into the tent, grab the keys to the car, leave everything in the tent down there, and we get in the car, and then we just decide to start taking off. But we really don't go anywhere. We're like, well, where are we going to go? We don't have anything. We don't, it's dark out. So I think at that point, my girlfriend had decided, well, listen, if it didn't hurt us, what's the point of us leaving? Why don't we just sleep in the car? Thinking, well, at this point, why don't we just do that? So we just basically leaned the seats back and stayed in that area by the sighting on the other side of the bluff in the car, a locked door. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, what the hell was that? We're trying to, is it a Bigfoot? And then I realized I got a camcorder in this car, and it's one of them camcorders back in '95. At least the one I had was probably kind of old. It was one of those that had a VHS full-size tape you put in it. I don't know if you remember them. Big suckers, you put the tape in. Batteries never stay charged really well. So I grabbed that. I had a fairly decent charge. I think it was charging up for a little bit. And then I took their flashlight, and I went back down. I stoked up the fire, and I stayed out there all night waiting for it to come back. The Bigfoot down by the camp. And she stayed in the car, and I literally stayed out almost all night, waited, nothing came back. I couldn't get anything. I wish I would have thought of, at the time, that during the sighting, that I had a camcorder. I would have grabbed the damn camcorder, but it didn't even dawn on me during the whole sighting. It didn't even dawn on me that I had it. I would have had it probably right next to me, and never would have thought of grabbing it probably. So, I don't know, that was kind of weird, but I regret that. The daylight came. I think at that point, before dusk, I ended up just sleeping for maybe a little bit in the car. Got up, soon as it was light enough, and I grabbed not the camcorder, because I didn't want to lug that thing down the beach. I figured I'm going to grab my camera, and at the time, the camera that I had was this little, these cameras that you buy. They're disposable. You can buy them, and then you basically, once you shoot all the 24 pictures or whatever's in them, and you mail it, you get them processed. If you remember those little cameras. So it was those little square Kodak things. So that's what I had. And then I went down, and then I could start to see, thank God, the footprints were still there. Even though the tide had come in a little bit near us, and then it was windy, there were still remarkable footprints up and down the beach from whence it came. So I noticed that there were several footprints, and was like, wow, these are huge, and it's daylight. And so I grabbed her, got her out of the car, and had her help me take pictures so I could lay next to some of them, or I could take pictures of her walking next to them for comparison, because you could take a picture of something on a beach, you have nothing to compare it with. It's not really any good. So that's what I did. We walked down as far as we could go, and as we got further down the beach, further than what we saw that night, it seemed like there was more than one footprint. When I mean more one footprint, different size. It was big, but it wasn't that one that came kind of pulsing in and out from south of the beach. It seemed like there was maybe others. I'm just assuming from some of the pictures I took. It looked like there was smaller ones and medium-sized ones, and this big one had gone up and down several times. So what I did notice is they all funneled at some point to the left into the forest, and they all kind of funneled into this trail that went towards the forest. Well, if you've been to Oregon, the forest is really thick. At least it is on the initial edge of it. Maybe on the inside it may not be as much, but I got to where it went in through brush where you literally would have to push against it to get in, and I didn't go past that. I didn't go into that curtain. And so I took these pictures, and we left, and then did the rest of the tour, our trip up to San Francisco. Flew out, talked about it, didn't talk about it. Thinking, God, is this real? Bigfoot? You see these statues along the way, these wood carvings, thinking maybe there's something to this. So that was the entirety. I may have missed something of the sighting, and I had the camera with me. And then when I got home, further on, where I contacted some investigators and had sent the film in to get it developed.
Yeah, the pictures are pretty amazing of the footprint, and I'll post them if I have your permission.
Sure.
They're pretty. They're actually really, really cool. What did you think of the whole topic of Sasquatch prior to this happening to you and was it your girlfriend or your wife?
Yeah, it was at the time my girlfriend. Yeah. I mean, I think me personally, I was aware of it. The age I am, the shows that I saw were like In Search Of, and I don't know, maybe it was on Unsolved Mysteries, something like that. So I was aware of it. I thought it was a possibility. Did I put a lot of stock in it, or did I research or study it? No, but I was aware of it. Certainly aware of Bigfoot tires and the common lore, Bigfoot, Harry and the Hendersons and all that later on. But I'm not sure if that was before 95. But I mean, it was plausible, but I didn't go, people are nuts. I just thought, well, it's possible.
Yeah, I understand all that. Let me ask you, when this thing's walking past you guys, I realize it's dark, but when it's walking past you guys, how far away from you was it?
Well, I think at the closest point, Wes, was probably, I'm going to guess 100 feet. When I say 90 degrees, so basically, to my left would be the plane, left, north, south, that's the plane. And then, degrees would be straight ahead would be 90, 45 would be more to the left to that angle. So I would say when it was at 90 degrees straight up, it was probably close to 100 feet, which would be probably about right. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but about that.
Really close, really. I mean, the thing's right there. And, I was saying there in the intro, Dan, that when you think of the beach, you don't think of Sasquatch. You don't think you'd ever run into some weird cryptid on the beach. But, the Oregon coast is very, very, it's thick wood lines, and then, very, very thick forest. And then, bam, you come out and the beach is right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's, very rugged. Not at least in that area at the time, there wasn't really any homes. There was just all wilderness, and the wilderness certainly on the right side of the highway there, Highway 101, into I'm not sure which national forest top of my head, but there was a lot of just wilderness there.
Yeah, I think you're probably near the Tillamook Forest, but when I think of Claire's encounter, from in San Diego in California when she had that encounter, I always wondered, why would these creatures go down to the beach? And if you really think about it, there's a lot of food down there on the beach. What do you think it was doing?
Yeah, I think it was just doing that. I kind of got the impression that it's done this before. This wasn't just like, oh my gosh, there's an ocean here. It looked like it had done this before. Obviously, it calculated to wait to do it at night. Just past sunset for cover. But it was comfortable enough to come out. And then, the odd thing, here it's clearly has to know we're up there. I mean, there's a fire going, and stand out like a sore thumb. You're in a fire, top of a kind of a little hill there. So it obviously knew we were there, and it just didn't seem to care. And that's kind of was its demeanor. Not so much. Maybe it was just checking to see if we were a threat. Maybe I was super hungry, wanted something. I don't know. But it just didn't. Once it kind of penetrated, came in and out, got closer, got more confidence. I guess it just didn't care. It probably was cautious, but I'm not saying it was just doing whatever. But it came out, and it just, we were no threat to it. Even when I was, on the ground in front of it, clearly I was no threat to it. It could care less. I always wonder what would have happened if I never would have left. What if I stood my ground? I mean, would I be alive? Would I been able to have the wherewithal to, stay conscious, I guess, to let this thing walk right by me? What would it do? And I always wonder, but, I guess if 9 times out of 10 that were to ever happen, I would have probably ran every time, I'm sure.
Yeah, what I find fascinating is the reaction of the creature. It didn't really react to you. If it was a human and you're saying, "Hey, I have a gun and I'm armed," the normal human reaction is to stop and take a pause for a second. And any other normal natural animal isn't going to cross paths with you. The weird part is it was almost like you guys were invisible to this thing.
It's almost was, yeah. I mean, obviously it saw us, and I think it is odd. I mean, if I were to hear a sighting, well, gosh, you're on a beach, and then it just walks out and could care less you're there. That does seem kind of peculiar behavior. Maybe there's more like that. You would know more than me. But, the fact that the length of the time, that we saw, it wasn't just a glimpse. This was several times it kind of came back and forth, and then had the really close sighting at the end there when it got. I'm going to guess, it was less than 50 yards. I'm sure it was probably maybe 100 feet. I don't know. Less than that, really, because it was 100 feet from up where we were. It was maybe 50, 60 feet away, and that's pretty darn close on a beach. And I guess you can give it for me staying there that long, but, I mean, that thing was towering over me at any distance, and this was just as wide, which I thought was just, it's just mind-numbing, really.
Let me ask you, if you could go back in time, would you have stood your ground?
I mean, I would like to think that I could, but I'm sure. No, probably not. Even if I was armed with something, of course, I'm not going to shoot somebody in a suit or something. I mean, unless I'm threatened. But is being afraid threatened? I mean, is it really? It's not having any aggressive behavior towards me. Could care less I'm there. It never growled. No paranormal type of, glowing eyes or any of the stuff that I, have heard of subsequently looking into this. It didn't have that. It didn't have a smell. Maybe it did smell, but the wind was going in a different direction. I didn't smell anything, but it just, yeah, I doubt it. I doubt it, Wes. I doubt I would have the courage to stay right there. I wonder what would happen if it would, maybe at that point, could have harmed me, and it probably could have easily.
Yeah, I'm sitting here looking at the pictures, and I'll post them, Dan, up for the audience listening on SasquatchChronicles.com. Underneath this episode, I'll throw the pictures that Dan took, and Dan, those footprints in that sand, those things are huge, man.
Yeah, they're heavy. Well, there's a little bit more to the story. I know I'm kind of long-winded here. I want to type up the sighting, but there's really a story afterwards. There's actually more information I'd like to give you if you don't mind. So let me continue on a little bit. So I get home, working for the Forest Service, and I get the pictures developed, and then I get them back, and then I kind of not really forgot about it, but I kind of put it aside until I got the pictures back developed. Which, for those who don't know, this old world enough, you actually had to get your film developed back in the day. Didn't have a cell phone back then, and I just was shocked at the pictures. Like, what the heck was this? You know? So I don't know if there was internet in 1995. I didn't have a computer to go on the internet, so I went to the library and I looked up Bigfoot and got a book from the local library, and it just happened to be this guy that was from the UK. I think he was living in Arizona at the time. His name was, what was his name? Richard Greenwell. I think that was his name. And he wrote a book. I couldn't tell you the name of the book, but I just remembered grabbing one, and it had an address. So I wrote him a letter, and I think I sent him some of those pictures that I sent to you. I must have sent him some pictures, and I put my card in there to show credibility by, working for the Forest Service. I'm sure they wouldn't appreciate me doing that, but I did. And I had, my number on there to call me, not at work, but at home. Make sure to call, call me at home. Don't call me at work. And I got a call from him, I don't know, the day he got the pictures. And he said, these are amazing pictures. This is he asked me some questions about the sighting, this and that. But he says there's a fellow that he knows that is in the Pacific Northwest that is running a Bigfoot research program. And his name is Peter Byrne. And he wanted me to contact him. So I said, okay, fine. So I called Peter Byrne, and, he had got pictures through him, or maybe it was the recommendation, whatever. I was a legit not a nut. So we started talking, and then he asked me straight up. He said, "Hey, I'd like to have you fill in a questionnaire thing. I'm going to send it to you. Can I get your address?" So I give him my address. Tell him not to give it to anybody. So he mails me a packet, but unfortunately, he mails it to work, the Forest Service. So here on my desk is, from the whatever it was, the Bigfoot Research something, it was center or something in Portland. People are kind of looking at me sideways like, "Hey, what do you got there?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's nothing, thank God I just hit that." But I don't know why he did that, but he did. But I filled it out. We both filled it out. And then he had somebody from the International Society of Cryptozoology, and there was a fellow, I have to think of his name, Jay Tischendorf. I don't even know who he is really. But he was in Colorado, and he interviewed us. And he took, at the time, my girlfriend and I separately and interviewed us. And a couple of things that he told me, which I thought was really interesting, I want to tell you. Well, one is, after he interviewed us both, he thought we were credible. Our stories matched up. And one of the things he did is he took us to a certain point to a building, away from a building. It was a big, huge log cabin building, and where I lived. And he stood at the same point, and he had a laser pointer. And he says, "Okay, I want you to take this laser pointer, and I want you to point, you're about, this is how far you were when you saw it together, by the beach or whatever." I said, "Yes." And he said, "Okay, point up to on that building where you saw the top of its head." So I said, "Okay, yeah, I know exactly where in my mind, right there, bam." Well, both of our laser pointers matched up almost exactly within an inch of the same. And I forgot what he said it was, but it was well over 8 foot, I think 8'6" or something like that. Is what he had measured. So that was kind of, eye-opening. The other thing that I learned, and I'm kind of sidestepping a little bit because we're talking about the depth on the beach. Something I learned, and I don't know if you know this, Wes, you're certainly more experienced than I am in all this stuff, but apparently if, a human being just makes a step, if you're just standing up right now and you're just take a casual, just one step forward, so your left foot's in front of your right or whatever, and then you're to kind of twist on your heels and then have your feet pointed forward as you're normally standing, but your legs are apart from that distance. And if you measure that distance from center point to center point of your feet, that is the width of your shoulders, which I didn't know that. And actually it is. So the distance between these footprints were over 4 feet on average. So that if that is a human being, let's say it is a person that did that, not a Bigfoot, they had a 4 foot plus wide shoulder. So that's a big person in a monkey suit doing that.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I didn't know that you could measure shoulders that way. And for the audience, I forgot to mention this. Dr. Meldrum actually put your encounter in his book, Sasquatch: A Legend Meets Science, along with the pictures that I'm going to post underneath this episode are actually in his book. But I didn't know that about the shoulders. And, and even in my own encounter, Dan, and I generally try and make the show about the eyewitness and not myself. But, I said the same thing. I said, this thing's shoulders were as wide as I am tall, kind of like what you were saying. It's hard to articulate that. And I think when you hear yourself say that, it just sounds so outrageous. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does. And, I think some of the things, the credibility from, well, at least Peter Byrne, taking, that you filter out people and, there's things that you look for that may not be quite right. But, me, saying that it was not aggressive or didn't have teeth and it was fangs and all that stuff, it just literally just could care less about us. It was just didn't care. But the one thing that he mentioned to me was, when I talked about it gliding on the beach when it walked, that was just so peculiar how that hung with me this night. It just almost was ghost-like, And he said, well, he had done a sighting research with somebody. I think, gosh, it was probably 50s or 60s. I don't know when he started. But it was near Mount St. Helens, whatever lake that was, Spirit Lake or whatever lake was there. And there was somebody who had seen a Bigfoot walk on the beach on the lake. They had a cabin, and he said that it looked like it was floating, like it was, floating as it went across the beach. And he said, well, you've never met this person. He didn't even know this person. And why is it people are stating the same thing that don't even know each other through time? So is kind of interesting. And that was what really brought me to you. Was at the beginning of your show, you have the lady who talks about it gliding across the beach. I'm thinking, my God, that's exactly what happened. So that's really kind of sparked my interest to contact and reach out to you.
Yeah, Claire from episode 515. She's there in the intro. And it's an amazing encounter, but they really do move like that. I did a show recently. It's on YouTube, and I threw it up as a podcast too as well. I interviewed a preacher from Texas, and he filmed this thing running across his farm. And when you watch it, it looks like like when you go to the airport and you can get on those little conveyor belts, and you can, I don't know why they're there, but you can get on them and you can get to your wherever you're going quicker. It's kind of like that. It's almost like these things are on a conveyor belt running or walking when you see them, and they don't have the bounce that, we as humans, when we walk or run, we have a bounce to us. These things don't, man. That's really how they move. It's almost like a gliding motion.
Yeah, that's it. And that's a great analogy. And I never thought about that at the airport when you're even just walking on one of those walking escalators. And that would really be what I saw. The other peculiar part was it was walking, but walking faster than it should. So like it was on an escalator walking. So yeah, I mean, that's basically what I saw. We saw, I say I, but we both saw. So
yeah, and I really think just between you and I and the audience, I think that they have that gliding motion because everyone talks about their feet. I really think it's their knee placement, because if you ever notice, their knees aren't where our knees are at. They're more like where our shins would be at. And I kind of think that's what causes the locomotion, the gliding motion that a lot of people describe. Let me ask you, Dan, how did this change your life?
Well, certainly initially, there was positive and negative from it. I came forward, and I can get into that whole story, which I regret doing at the time now, but I did do it, and it had some implications at work being in law enforcement. But I did it. I was younger. I'm in my 50s now, but back then I was not. As far as personally, it's not the same for me. Literally have a very difficult time camping, and I love camping. I always am looking over my shoulder when I'm hiking. Having the knowledge of actually knowing that this exists, and you're out there, it's eerie. I'll be honest with you. And, there's people that I have met subsequently, like, oh, I want to see one, or I can't wait to go find one, and we're going to run out at night and, and call for it. I'm thinking, are you crazy? You're nuts. I mean, in my opinion, no offense to anyone, I wouldn't want to attract one or, necessarily see one again. I certainly wouldn't want to go see one out, in the woods somewhere where I guess on the beach is scary enough, but it certainly changed my life. Professionally too, when I was working, I was a ranger in the Pike National Forest. And apparently I found out through one of the investigators that he's like, hey, how do you feel about, having Bigfoot in the forest you work? I'm like, what? There's a Bigfoot in my forest? And he's like, oh yeah, there's sightings. And thinking, oh, great. Now I got to worry about that, So certainly it had changed my perspective on where I am in the world. But it's also good too. This shows you that we don't know everything. And to think that we do is pretty arrogant.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. Was that Pikes Peak in Colorado?
Yeah, it would have been the Salpet Ranger District, which is going to be more towards, to the north. There's the Pikes District, which is near Pikes, which is Pikes Peak. So it'd be north of Pikes Peak, Colorado Springs. There's an area to the north of that. It's a huge forest, and that's where I worked. And really the whole forest was, I worked in every national forest, really, with the authority, but where I was stationed and worked was in that forest, in that district.
Yeah, kind of like what you were just saying, Dan. Pikes Peak, Colorado is notorious for sightings.
Yeah, I found that out later. Yeah. So, a couple of things I wanted to add. Sorry I'm rambling about this whole sighting with you and everybody. First time on a podcast, everybody. Sorry. So, I back to this Richard Greenwell anyway. This Peter Byrne and all that. So he reaches out and says, "Hey, would you like to talk to USA Today?" He wants to do a story, and it's a USA Today. I don't even know if it was a newspaper, I think, back then. And so I'm like, oh yeah, as long as it's all confidential. So I talked to this lady, and it was about him mostly and his organization or his research, a little bit about mine. And then that's sparked to the AP and got out in other publications, the sighting. And then ABC contacted him. They wanted me to be on TV with him. And I said, there's just no way in hell I'm going to do that when he asked me. There's no way I'm going to do that. And he said, well, this would really help my research. I understand, but, we could do it. You would be incognito, blah, blah, blah. No one would know anything. And, well, if you ever watch the video, and you're welcome to share that too, that link from the Good Morning America episode that I did post on YouTube, it clearly shows me and gives more of my name than I wanted. But that kind of changed my life a little bit too in that regards. This definitely did have some credibility issues. When you see something like that, you're in law enforcement, people kind of look at you differently. So luckily it's acute. It went away after a while. People kind of forget, people move on, and then, some people are very interested. People, professionally in the Forest Service especially, would set me aside and they would talk about it. They would be interested as, hey, I had this is what happened to me, or this was odd, or whatever, and they kind of open-minded about it. But publicly, most people, if they're in a group of people, will just poo-poo it or kind of make fun of you, and that's why a lot of these people, I'm sure you've talked to, and certainly somebody in law enforcement will not come forward. And, I did. And that's not the reason why I'm not in law enforcement anymore. I didn't get, run out because I saw Bigfoot, but that had nothing to do with it later on. But, I can see why a lot of people just don't want to come forward.
Yeah, and I get what you mean, Dan. And I don't think that police officers are any more credible than anyone else in any other profession. But having said that, being a cop, your credibility is everything. So I can see coming forward and saying, I saw this, a Sasquatch, would cause problems in your career. And I always admire police officers, when they do come forward, because there is that risk that they have. If you work in a warehouse or something like that, it's probably not going to affect your job. But being a cop, it might. But I think, times are changing, and I think more and more people are open to the idea of these things being out there, especially with eyewitnesses coming forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the culture has certainly changed now, certainly from 1995. It's like, there's Bigfoot shows everywhere, it's more common. So it's more accepting, I think, now with all the research, I think, too, and the findings of things, which I've done all of the ins and outs as you do up to date. But Meeting, the positive thing would be meeting people like Peter Byrne and some of the other people in the Bigfoot world, as you would call it, I guess. And that was kind of a plus. One other thing I wanted to mention to you, back a little bit. Sorry, I know I'm going long-winded here, Wes, but after that sighting, the following year, that was August, and then 96 June, I think that's when the filming for the Good Morning America show was, and it was on scene. And I met Peter Byrne for the first time, and we had gone to the sighting. I showed him everything. He, was taking notes, taking pictures. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about what was amazing was as we went down the beach, I said, this is right here. This is where they went in, or it went in. And he says, okay, let's go. And I'm like, are you crazy? This is during the day, 3:00 in the afternoon. But I'm like, I'm not going in there. He's like, oh, that's okay, So I got the courage, and we went in through, and then we kind of bushwhacked for, maybe 8-10 feet. And then once we got in, there was like this honed out trail that went up this hillside and kind of hooked to the right over this pond area, and then went up, towards the highway. And it was just amazing. It looked like somebody had grabbed these branches and just ripped them off the trees. And it was just like, honed out trail. You could walk on it and not hit a branch, a huge something. So that was odd. And then when we got to the top, at that time, earth movers had just started moving, and I think they have a subdivision up there now, but at the time there was not. And that's unfortunate for that area. But, we did catch the trail again, past earth movers at that time, and then went down and followed the trail all the way to the highway. And it looks like it may have been using a giant culvert to cross underneath the highway, and then went on from there. Of course, I didn't do any of that research. He did. But I thought that was cool, and I think I have some pictures of that somewhere. I have to find them. But that kind of like, well, okay, that kind of put it more in place for me that this wasn't a person. This was an animal.
Yeah, please send that along. I'll post those with the other pictures that you have. Let me ask you, Dan, and there's no wrong answer to this, and I ask everyone, what do you think Sasquatch is?
Yeah, I think, initially what I had thought, and certainly to this day still, with my experience, it was a flesh and blood animal. I don't think it was human. I think it could be a hybrid human. I don't know, some type of undeveloped, advanced human as we are, humanoid. It's an animal, whether it is a ape or from that lineage or from one of us, humans that had gone on the other branch. It seemed more like that to me, more of a Neanderthal type of. Well, not even, that would be maybe more advanced, further on, more towards human, somewhere in between there. Definitely flesh and blood. I didn't have any paranormal, spiritual, experience. It didn't appear and disappear. It walked. It made footprints on the beach. It just could care less who I was. It knew we were there. Was looking for food, so it has to eat. So, looking back at the pictures and thinking about it again, I could just say it's an animal.
Yeah, and you could be right, Dan. You could definitely be right. What I think is so fascinating about your account is the creature's behavior, how it was still making its way towards you and could care less that you were there. I really appreciate the fact that you would take the time to come on and share it, Dan. I really enjoyed chatting with you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, I appreciate it. I hope I did okay. I was a little nervous, but I think I got through it.
Yeah, you did fine, Dan. You did great. Thank you again. And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Until next time, everyone.
Mindlessly drinking, not tasting, just fighting danger I like. Save me from myself, let me drown in my black lake. Let me float away. Save me from myself, let me drown in my black lake. Beauty is a black lake, let me sail away. Beauty is a black lake, let me sail away. Darkness approaching, deep water keeps flowing. It inhales me in the stormy tide. Endless emotion, a dawn thought, a notion, an epiphany, bring the shore to life. Save me from myself, let me drown in my black